Somewhere in your garden right now, a perennial is quietly deciding how much of your yard it is going to own by next spring. It looked innocent at the garden center, and now you cannot get rid of it. Some of the prettiest perennials ever sold to the American gardener are the ones that spend the next decade fighting you back. Nobody warns you at checkout because the garden center makes money every time you replant what the invader smothered. 15 perennials to rip out before fall. Number 2 includes a grandmother pass-along that most gardeners cannot dig out of the lawn once it settles in. Number 1 has an underground root system so deep every fragment left in the soil grows back into a whole new plant. Number 15, evening primrose. Yellow, 4-petaled flowers that open at dusk, sold as a charming cottage plant. What almost nobody sells you is the fact that evening primrose is one of the most prolific self-sowers in the perennial catalog. One plant drops thousands of seeds in September, and by the following June, you have evening primrose coming up in every gap between every plant across the whole bed. Cut every spent flower head before the seed capsules dry and crack open. Late July through August is the exact window. Miss it and you have already reseeded next year's problem. Dig the parent clumps out completely by early fall. If you love the yellow, plant threadleaf Coreopsis Zagreb instead. Same warm yellow flower show, fine ferny foliage, blooms June through frost. Zagreb stays as a tight clump exactly where you planted it, never a seedling wandering across the bed. One clarification worth making: the evening primrose problem is specifically the common wild species. The pink and yellow ones sold cheap in seed packets and 1-gallon pots at chain garden centers. There are a few compact hybrids like Sunset Boulevard that stay well behaved. Number 14, Chinese lantern, the bright orange papery lanterns that dry beautifully for fall arrangements. Nobody at the garden center mentions that Chinese lantern is not a plant, it is an underground occupation force. Rhizomes run 3 to 5 feet in a single growing season, popping up in the middle of your peonies, under your hosta, along the foundation of the house. Dig the entire clump out this week with as much of the rhizome as you can trace. Every piece left will re-sprout. Do not compost the rhizomes, bag and trash. For the same architectural fall interest, plant Baptisia or balloon flower. Baptisia holds structure and turns black bronze in fall. Balloon flower gives you late summer blooms into the border and stays put. Number 13, ribbon grass. Variegated grass with white and green striped blades, sold as an ornamental grass for garden borders. It is not ornamental. It is one of the most aggressive rhizomatous grasses in the ground cover trade. It runs 6 to 8 feet in every direction over 3 seasons, chokes out perennials, and creeps into lawn grass. Cut it down to the ground now and start excavating the edges of the clump with a sharp spade. Every rhizome must come out. Sift the soil for any white running roots you find. If you want a striped or fine-textured ornamental grass at the border, plant native little bluestem or switchgrass. Both stay in a tight clump exactly where you planted them, hold their shape through winter for structure, and turn beautiful bronze in fall. I planted ribbon grass once, around 94, in a corner bed thinking the white striping would brighten the shade. Within 3 years, it had jumped from that corner into 3 other beds by way of rhizomes traveling under a walkway. Took me a full weekend of hand digging and sifting soil for every root fragment I could find. That is not a decorative grass. That is a slow-motion garden invasion sold at every big box store. Number 12, Spiderwort. Purple 3-petaled flowers on slender stems sold as a shade-tolerant cottage perennial. What the plant tag never says is that Spiderwort self-seeds like a weed, spreads by rhizome, and by midsummer flops open in the middle in a sprawling floppy mess that stays ugly through fall. Cut every plant to the ground now before the seed pods dry. Dig out any clumps that have escaped where you planted them. For the same blue-purple color in a well-behaved perennial, plant Amsonia, blue star. Fine narrow foliage, sky blue star flowers in spring, and clear golden yellow foliage in fall. That is one of the prettiest things in an October perennial bed. Stays as a tight, non-spreading clump for decades. Number 11, yellow archangel. Silver green leaves marbled with cream, small yellow flowers. sold aggressively at chain garden centers as a shade ground cover. Washington State and Oregon have both classified yellow archangel as a Class B noxious weed and banned it from sale entirely because it escapes garden beds into forests and displaces native understory across the entire Pacific Northwest. Rip up whole mats now, while the soil is soft from summer rain. Every root fragment re-sprouts, so double-check the area next spring and pull any regrowth immediately. For the same silverleaf shade ground cover effect, plant native wild ginger for the darker corners or foam flower for a slightly brighter shade area. Both are native, both stay controlled, and both give you the shade foliage color without the Pacific Northwest ban. Yellow archangel is not just a Pacific Northwest problem. Extension services in Michigan, New York, Ontario, and British Columbia have all documented it escaping into forest understory. If you inherit yellow archangel with a house, the removal window is now. Comment the plant you regret planting most in your own yard, plus your U.S. state. I read every single comment on this channel. Number 10. Chameleon plant, the multicolored ground cover with green, cream, red, and pink variegated heart-shaped leaves, sold since the 1990s as a colorful shade ground cover. Extension services across the country now list chameleon plant as one of the single most difficult perennials to remove from a garden bed once it establishes. The rhizomes are brittle and shallow. Every time you try to dig it out, the rhizomes snap, and each fragment re-sprouts. A university study on herbicide resistance found that chameleon plant is not effectively controlled by the standard concentrations of glyphosate or the other common ornamental herbicides. There is no easy chemical shortcut. The only real removal strategy is smothering. Cut the whole patch to the ground, cover it with cardboard or heavy black plastic weighted down at the edges, and leave it in place for a full growing season. Then hand dig what tries to come up around the perimeter next spring. Even this method takes 2 full years for stubborn stands. Prevention is the entire game with this plant. If a neighbor has it, keep a 2-foot buffer zone of bare soil between your gardens. If you have it, start smothering this weekend. For the same variegated foliage effect in a controlled shade plant, plant Brunera Jack Frost, which has silver heart-shaped leaves all season, tiny blue flowers in spring, and it stays as a manageable clump for 15 or 20 years. One quick word before number 9. The book that maps out the whole way I design a perennial garden without inviting the invaders in the first place lives at henrysgardensecrets.com. This is the only mention. Number 9. Tansy, bright yellow button-shaped flowers on tall stems, sold at herb-focused garden centers as an heirloom herb. Tansy is toxic to cats, dogs, and livestock, spreads by both rhizome and seed, and is classified as a noxious weed in several western and midwestern states. Cut every flower head now, before the seed heads mature. Start digging the parent clumps with as much of the root system as you can extract. Bag and trash the tops with the flower heads. Do not compost. For the same golden yellow flat-topped flower effect in a safe, controlled perennial, plant Achillea moonshine, silver foliage yarrow with lemon yellow flat flower plates. Stays as a compact clump, non-toxic, and butterflies love it. There is a specific reason Tansy shows up in old New England and Appalachian gardens. It was planted as a folk medicinal from the 1600s onward, and the seed bank in those old properties can persist for decades. If you bought an old farmhouse and Tansy is coming up in the fence rows every May, you are dealing with historical seed rain, not one recent plant. Persistent pulling and mowing over 3 to 5 years drains the seed bank eventually. And the toxicity is real. The pyrethrin-like compounds cause chronic liver damage in horses and livestock that graze it. Number 8. Sweet autumn clematis, the vine that covers your fence in a cloud of small fragrant white flowers in September. Sold at almost every garden center in the eastern half of the country. Officially listed as invasive in Alabama, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, and probably invasive in several more states where documentation has not caught up. Prolific seed production is the actual danger. One vine drops tens of thousands of wind-dispersed seeds every September. And next spring you have sweet autumn clematis coming up in fences, hedges, and woodlots for a quarter-mile downwind. Prune the vine hard immediately after flowering ends, before the seed heads mature. That is the single most important control action. Cut it before it sets seed. If it is climbing on a native tree or a wanted shrub and choking it, cut the vine at the base of the trunk and pull it down. For the same September fragrant white vine effect, plant the native Clematis virginiana, same look, native to eastern woodlands, and does not seed itself across the neighborhood. One critical timing detail: the window between flowering ending and seed maturity is only about 3 to 4 weeks in most of the eastern half of the country. If sweet autumn clematis flowered in late August, the seeds are ripening through September and dropping in October. Prune hard in the second week of September. Cut everything back to about a foot from the base. That single action stops the year's seed rain into the neighborhood. Miss that window, and you have contributed a fresh wave of invasive seed to every yard downwind. Number 7. Plume poppy. 8-foot-tall, dramatic gray-green foliage with feathery plumes of cream flowers, sold as an architectural back-of-border perennial. Plume poppy is impressive the first year, aggressive the second year, and a full property occupation force by year 3. Thick underground rhizomes run 20 feet through neighboring garden beds and pop up in the middle of established peonies, hostas, and phlox. Start excavating the edges of the clump now, while you can still trace where the mother plant ends. Every year you wait, the perimeter doubles. Once plume poppy is in the middle of your other perennials, you are moving those perennials to a rescue bed to save them. For the same dramatic tall back-of-border effect, plant goat's beard or false indigo. Aruncus gives you the same feathery white flower panicles and dramatic foliage without the rhizome invasion. Baptisia gives you architectural blue-green foliage all season, blue-purple flower spikes in spring, and interesting black seed pods in fall, and it stays as one clump. Number 6. Comfrey. The blue-purple bell-shaped flowers of Comfrey get sold to garden centers as a beneficial herb for the permaculture garden. The reality of Comfrey is that it has a taproot that goes 18 to 24 inches down into the ground, and every fragment of that taproot left in the soil regenerates a new plant. Once you have Comfrey, you have Comfrey forever, unless you commit to a multi-year removal project. If you have any Comfrey in a garden bed right now, this is the moment to start digging. The deeper you go, the better. Get every inch of taproot you can trace out. Anything you miss will be back next spring, and the older the plant, the deeper the root, and the harder the removal. I inherited a Comfrey patch when I bought my first property in the mid-'80s. I dug for 5 straight summers, and I was still pulling Comfrey shoots every June through the early 90s. That is what it takes. Do not let a Comfrey plant get a second season in the ground. For the same pollinator magnet purple flower show, plant anise hyssop. Bumblebees swarm it all summer. It stays as a compact clump, and it holds beautiful vertical flower spikes for 8 weeks straight. Number 5. Obedient plant. The name is a lie. Sold with pink or white flower spikes in late summer, marketed as an obedient perennial because the individual flowers can be pushed side to side and stay where you put them. The plant itself is one of the least obedient perennials in the American nursery trade. It runs by rhizome through the entire bed within 3 seasons. Cut every flowering stem now before the seed heads mature. Then start excavating the clump aggressively with a spade. Trace and remove every white rhizome you can find. Missing a foot of rhizome means the patch is back next spring. For the same tall pink or white flower spike look, plant Liatris or Salvia caradana. Liatris gives you the vertical purple candles that butterflies swarm, growing from corms that stay put. Caradana salvia gives you the deep purple flower spikes for weeks in early summer on tight, compact plants that never spread. The plant was named obedient because the individual flowers on the spike stay where you push them side to side, an old Victorian flower arrangement trick. Nobody named it for its garden behavior. Number 4. Gooseneck loosestrife. The white curved flower spikes shaped like a goose's neck, sold as a charming cottage perennial. Gooseneck loosestrife spreads by underground rhizomes into a dense mat that swallows a garden bed in 3 seasons and jumps into the neighboring lawn. cottage garden appeal in year 1, monoculture takeover in year 4. Start excavating the edges of the clump now while the outline is still visible. Every year you delay, the perimeter doubles and the removal work triples. Dig out every rhizome you can extract. For the same white vertical flower spike look in a well-behaved native perennial, plant Culver's root. Same tall white candles, holds up in wind, stays as a tight, non-spreading clump for decades, and it is a magnet for native pollinators. Gooseneck loosestrife has a yellow-flowered cousin, Lysimachia punctata, that some gardeners plant as the safer version. It is not safer. Punctata is even more aggressive than the standard white gooseneck species. If your loosestrife has upright yellow flowers instead of white curved spikes, you have the worst of the two. Both share the same rhizome behavior. Dig to at least 8 inches deep to trace and remove the running roots. And check next spring in the neighboring lawn. Loosestrife pops up in turf grass with alarming enthusiasm once it crosses the bed edge. If you want the videos on this channel showing up in your feed, hit subscribe. The ones about the specific problem you have been fighting, the corner where nothing grows, the bed you cannot keep alive, those are what this channel exists to make. The subscribe button is what keeps them from getting lost in the algorithm. Number 3, bee balm, Monarda, the pollinator favorite that every garden magazine tells you to plant. And I understand why. Bees swarm it, hummingbirds work it, and the red or pink flower heads are photogenic. Here is the honest problem nobody prints in the plant tag. Standard bee balm, Monarda didyma, spreads by underground rhizomes into a widening ring every year. And every year, the center of that ring gets powdery mildew so bad by August that the middle of the clump turns to gray dusted brown, crispy leaves. You end up with a hollow donut of half-dead foliage that keeps expanding into your other plants. Now is when to divide it. Cut the mildewed center out, thin the whole patch, and dig out the outer rhizomes that have crossed the border. Do this every 3 years, or the whole bed is bee balm. For a much better pollinator magnet alternative, plant wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa, the native species with pale lavender flowers. It is significantly more mildew-resistant, spreads more slowly, and native bees actually prefer it. Even better, plant anise hyssop, no mildew, non-spreading, bumblebees adore it, and it blooms for 8 to 10 straight weeks. Number 2, lily of the valley and mint, 2 grandmother pass-along plants I have to put together because both are the same mistake in different clothes. Both smell wonderful, both are toxic, both spread by underground rhizomes into a mat that runs under fences, into lawns, and never stops. Lily of the valley. My grandmother's Ohio front border had a patch of lily of the valley from the 1940s. By the 70s, that patch had spread under a 100-foot lawn and was coming up on the other side. Toxic to cats, dogs, and kids who put the red berries in their mouths. Once it is under a lawn, only years of hand digging or a herbicide program removes it. Mint. Same rhizome behavior, faster spread, and just as tenacious once established in open soil. Every gardener over 60 has planted mint in a bed at some point and spent the next decade fighting it. If you have either in a garden bed right now, dig the clumps out with as much of the shallow rhizome mat as you can extract. Bag and trash. Mint from this day forward goes only in a plastic pot, plunged into the ground to the rim if you want that in-bed look, but the pot walls are the only thing that keeps mint contained. For the fragrant white spring flowers of lily of the valley, plant Foam flower, white star-shaped flower panicles in April, staying as a controlled clump under trees. For the herb function of mint, plant the mint variety of your choice in a large plastic container on the patio, never in the ground. One quick thing before the last one. Hit the like button if you have ever fought one of the plants on this list and felt like the only gardener in America losing to it. You are not alone. Number 1. Creeping bellflower, bishop's weed. 2 plants sold as pretty ornamentals that share the same trait, the deepest, most fragmentation-resistant root systems in the entire perennial catalog. Creeping bellflower has purple bell-shaped flowers and a taproot that goes 12 inches deep. Bishop's weed has green and white variegated leaves and a shallow rhizome mat that resprouts from every fragment. If you have either right now, Dig them out this fall, sift the soil to 12 inches deep for creeping bellflower, and never rototill bishop's weed because tilling multiplies it. This is the one you regret most. Rip it first. 15 perennials. Every one of them looked like a good idea in the garden center pot, and every one of them cost me years of digging to undo. Do not wait for spring. Pull them now before fall, while they are still showing you exactly where they are and before they seed for next year. Plant the alternative instead, and in one season you get the beauty without the takeover.